As usual, any information discussed in this podcast is not financial advice. All opinions reflect those of the individuals, and this podcast is for educational purposes only. You should always read the PDS and talk to a financial advisor who can consider your personal circumstances before you invest. If you like listening to Alpha Females Invest, we would love your support on Instagram at Alpha Females Invest, and you can also find us on LinkedIn. And if you do want to find out more information about us and our episodes, you can visit our website at alphafemalesinvest.com.au, and please note that episodes may be supported by guests from time to time. Welcome back to the Alpha Females Invest podcast, two females working in the finance industry searching for alpha. My name is Emily.
And my name is Maddie.
And together we bring diversified perspectives from the buy and sell side of the finance world.
Today, we are very excited to welcome our two fantastic guests, Meredith Jordan and Lindsay Hurst, who are joining us from Platinum Pacific Partners, a leading provider of executive search solutions to financial services, corporate and asset management clients in Australia. Meredith joined Platinum Pacific Partners in 2014 and is responsible for the firm's investment management and listed markets practice. Her portfolio of clients includes superannuation and traditional asset managers, securities research and sales, asset consultants, as well as distribution professionals. Before joining PPP, Meredith spent the majority of her career with both global and boutique search firms, managing senior-level search assignments across a variety of sectors within financial services.
It's two for the price of one today, and we're also thrilled to have Lindsay Hurst, who is a director focused on investment management and equities. Lindsay joined PPP in 2021, and she assists with the growth of the firm's listed markets practice. Her portfolio of clients include investment banks in equity research and sales, asset managers and asset owners. Lindsay also leads the corporate investor relations division, focusing on ASX-listed companies. Prior to joining PPP, she spent 17 years in financial markets, having worked across various asset classes, including equities, OTC credit and derivatives, both in Australia and in London. So thank you both for joining us on the show.
Thank you for having us.
Hello, ladies. Lovely to talk to you.
So to kick us off, we start the episode in the same way each time, and we would love to hear about your most embarrassing career moment, if you have one.
Oh, look, we were talking about this earlier. It's a funny one because clearly there's those obvious things where, you slip in the street in front of a really important client, or I was telling Lindsay about how I was in the middle of a really important presentation and my dress split, things like that. Always fun. But actually the most embarrassing, I guess, career moments for me is when I've not been prepared going to a meeting, caught out when I didn't know something or caught on the spot. That is mortifying, to say the least. So that would probably be, and that's an ongoing thing, right? I mean, it's a continually trying to make sure we're on top of everything that's going on in the market from a people movement perspective and, of course, the themes perspective. So, yeah, as people probably don't realise in search, a lot of our work actually is research and talking to people versus just hiring people. So being specialists in our fields, and I guess if you're not prepared, you can't be a specialist.
Yes, and to back that up, we were having a good laugh about that. I was exchanging an embarrassing interview moment earlier in my career where I was going into level 28 of a very big investment bank, brand new shoes on, beautiful high heels, and I slipped straight over on the marble floor on my hands and knees, Yeah, it was humiliating. I split the back of my skirt. I had to walk out of there in tears. It was horrible. But that's nothing in comparison to being underprepared for meetings. And I think it's a thematic that will carry on throughout this podcast, and it continues, as Meredith said, it continues to be something we constantly speak to our candidates about as well.
Sounds great. Thanks, guys. And yeah, really looking forward to getting into all your advice for any potential listeners as well as we move on through the podcast. But to start, I thought it might be interesting to get a bit of background on PP and, what exactly your business does for those listeners that might not be too familiar.
Awesome. No, we'd love to do that. We are a search firm. So effectively, we are a business that companies will come to us and they will partner with us, and we will share research around certain industries and actively headhunt people for those roles within those industries. So as a business, we're 16 people. We have 5 areas of discipline, so we're primarily financial markets. So we'll cover investment banking, corporate advisory, we'll do all unlisted investments, so VC, PE, real estate, infrastructure and debt. The area I run, of which Lindsay's in the team, we cover all listed market investments, so equities and debt, buy side and sell side. We'll also do all fundraising, capital raising across institutional, wholesale and retail clients, as well as marketing and also the asset owner world. We also cover finance and operations. We also cover business support. So we have individuals that are, I guess, specialists in those verticals. But I guess that's a bit of background on us. We are, I guess, known as a bit more a boutique business than a larger one.
But I was just going to say that I think most of our audience probably would have heard of PPP. And if you haven't, not really sure where you've been hiding, because they're definitely a dominant force in the market. So moving on, just to get a bit of a background, I mean, I think you kind of touched on it there, Meredith, but just about your roles at PPP and kind of what led you to get to where you are today in terms of recruitment and your focus areas?
So really good question. It's really funny because the skill set that you need to be a headhunter is actually really it's ununique. You know, you have to be good at listening, you have to be good at speaking, you have to be good at, writing. And it's about effectively providing solutions for your clients. So there's a certain amount of empathy that's involved in that. And so I guess it's anyone that really enjoys working with people should be great at recruitment. And then it's about marrying your interests with respect to the industry you're working in. So my background, as we discussed before, I was in real estate. I loved it. It was great. It was a sales role. The people were fun. It was deal by deal. It was really great. I never thought I would move into headhunting at all. And then I saw this ad in the paper. I thought, oh, that sounds interesting. I'll give it a whirl. And here we are today. So most of our business actually is made up of individuals that have had different lives. We've had accountants that have moved into headhunting. We've had people in markets that's moved to headhunting. We've actually got a wonderful gal that was at Credit Suisse in the HR team. She's now joined the team. Obviously, one of the biggest coups we had was pulling Lindsay out of markets and bringing her into the team. That's been awesome. Took me a long time to get her over the line. It just happened that there was a little moment when I saw a little opportunity to sell the dream. And here we are today. And it's been a great transition because, of course, she brings the market knowledge and would have also hired people within her role at CLSA. So for anyone out there, if you were thinking about headhunting, it's actually a really rewarding role because in most cases you play a really important part of their lives. And usually it's a very positive experience.
And certainly from my perspective, coming from markets, I still love investing. I love being in the market, but there's something lovely about helping your former colleagues, clients, your listed companies who, I used to deal with in corporate access all the time, helping them build out their businesses because you get to know them along your career journey and you understand their culture, you understand how they work. And it's lovely when you become the go-to person or go-to firm in helping them continue to build that out. It's really rewarding and it allows you to still stay within the market.
Amazing. It's definitely great to hear how important relationship building is in your role, and also, as Meredith touched on, having being able to be empathetic to support your clients. I thought it might be interesting to touch on maybe what the model of a recruiter is and maybe how recruiters are incentivized and those aspects of the role.
It's a good question. There's 3 types of recruiters or headhunters really in the market. So there is what we call a recruiter pyramid, if you think about in that sort of descriptive sense. The top of the pyramid is what we would consider the global search firms. So Heidrick, Korn Ferry, Spencer Stewart, Russell Reynolds, Egon Zehnder. So they are businesses that sit all around the world. And they usually are working on very, very senior appointments, so CEO upwards. They can be heads of divisions. They can be every industry, not so much specific on one. And their key service offering is that they can relocate people around the world. We sit in the next part of the pyramid, which goes down, and that's more executive search. So it's vertical, industry specific. You come to us for a specific role. We live and breathe those verticals. Both the global search firms and us usually work either exclusively only or via a retainer. So we would be paid up front to work on an assignment, which effectively pays for the research we do and all the background exercises to start the search. And then, of course, we're acting in partnership with our clients all the time, and then we agree targets to go and headhunt, and we will actively go and do that. And then we will obviously bring those individuals to the table, we'll qualify them, we'll prepare them for interviews, we'll run them through the interview schedule, we'll get them ready. We'll make sure when they resign, that's successful. There's no counters, that sort of stuff. And then we get paid at the end. So it's usually a set fee based on, the candidate's first year salary, whether it's a base and super or if there's any bonuses. And so it really varies. But in most instances, it's a retainer up front and then paid on success. And then within the lower part of the recruitment pyramid is your classic, I call them Wall Street search firms or recruitment firms. It's my UK terminology. So Michael Page, Hudson, Robert Walters, that world, and they are great, but they will usually have so many areas of coverage and they'll work with big clients. So they'll do a lot of areas, and some very much in detail like ours, but some more will advertise and match the CVs to the advertisements. So different levels of, solutions that our clients can access. But, that's typically how I describe all recruitment and executive search in the market.
And I should say that this is an episode that has been in the works with Lindsay since 2021, I think. So I'm glad that we're finally able to have this discussion. But I guess the context of the conversation initially was what is happening with the job market and where are we at in the cycle. So it would be really interesting to understand that, given the last 3 years, there have been all kinds of ups and downs in the job market. It feels like every week it's kind of shifting. So I guess, do you have any views on how the job market is looking at the moment and any changes you've seen maybe since COVID or even just in the past year or so?
This is something that we're talking about a lot. We have had a phenomenal amount of change in the market over the last couple of years, and very unprecedented change. COVID was like nothing we've ever seen before. The amount of hiring was bizarre, to say the least. It was extremely challenging and extremely rewarding, if you got it right. Usually when you're working on assignments, you'll be talking to candidates and they'll probably be looking at one or two other things because they're active and they want to be, open to opportunities. But we were calling people and they were looking at 8. I used the description that I felt like I was playing a game of NFL and I was the blocker trying to get my quarterback over the line. Every single lob of other offer coming on, I'm knocking them out of the way to try and get my person over the line. It was full on. So, that was the last, that was what, 2020, mid-2020 to mid-2022, 23, I'd say. But now really we're in a normal market. So what does that mean? We normally have great roles in the market. So there's always businesses growing, changing, resizing, cutting, it's always the case. Clearly with last year's market volatility and just interest rates going up and changes in terms of sentiment in the market, we saw some significant slowdowns after COVID, which actually was kind of a good thing. We couldn't keep up with that pace.
The pace was ridiculous. And to give you an idea, I joined PPP in 21, and it was one of the key things was supposed to be a work-life balance, play, and it absolutely was not that. The pace was out of control. We had closed borders. We had visa backlogs, rather. We had 2 new entrants, major players enter the market. It was insane.
I've never actually seen anything like it. I came back from England in 06, 07, God, I sound so old. And I came into a bull market and it was crazy fun. It was like shooting fish in a barrel. Oh, you'd like to be an analyst? You can go there. Oh, I didn't realize that you also could build models. Oh, you'd like to be an analyst? Okay, you can go there. Like, it was weird. But this was different. This was like nothing else. It was like a massive brawl for talent.
Yeah, the war for talent was absolutely real.
But now, because we've had, all these changes, and frankly, last year we had all the global investment banks having headcount freezes for an entire year, over a year. I mean, that's pretty unprecedented, actually. And we've had all these cuts. So it has meant that a lot of the pace has come out. A lot of the, happy to move and lack of fear in moving is gone. Everyone's very nervous about being the last one in, first one out. The cost of living, certainly in Australia, and the pressures on that have really affected people's desire to want to change at this time too. So, that's all of these factors have slowed down our market. But what I would say is that when this happens, all the big firms, they close their doors or shut up shop in terms of hiring, but all the boutiques go crazy. So for us, it just feels normal. We've got busy areas, pockets of our business that are, growing, some aren't. That's actually pretty standard for us in any one year. So I would just say we've returned to the norm.
And to that point, a lot of the boutiques who wanted to hire during those first couple of years that I became a headhunter in 21, 22, they simply couldn't compete with the wage push inflation that was happening because of this war for talent. And this week alone, I've met with 2 boutiques who have said to me, Lindsay, I think this is now our time. We're starting to see the heats come out. We finally can re-enter, and this is our opportunity to pick up hopefully some great talent. And so it's just reflective. It's a reflective anecdote of what Meredith has just said.
And on that, salaries have come off. People who've been made redundant for no fault of their own, unfortunately, aren't going back into the market at the same rate they were on. Firms are holding tight for an individual at the signed off budget they have. We can't just go and get an extra 5 or 10 anymore. We had situations where individuals knew the market was so hot and would go into their employers in groups and almost pressure gang their employers for pay increases because they knew other institutions would pay for them. We've never seen that behaviour before. It was really interesting, and it did actually happen globally. I mean, this is not just an Australian thing. I speak to peers globally, but that is not the market anymore. We are very much back in what I would consider a normal cycle of hiring.
So what are you both seeing at the moment in this, I guess, more normalised market in terms of new focus areas for talent? Maybe that's in ESG or quant. Yeah, what skill sets do you think firms are looking at?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. And I think, it won't surprise you to know the key areas, of course, ESG and sustainability. And this, this is your world. you both understand this being what you do for a living. I think with the mandatory reforms and disclosure requirements coming out July 1 this year around climate disclosures, you're going to continue to see an increased importance and demand for talent that understands, the ESG and sustainability side of things. So therefore, what are we seeing on our side? We're seeing funds and listed companies coming to us wanting those who understand ESG, have the ability to work with data, AI, being able to manipulate large amounts of data. So that's a key thematic we're seeing rolling out from our side. Energy transition, private equity, private debt, huge, as well as alternatives. It won't surprise you to know also that a lot of funds continue to look to expand their product offering going into global, and whether that's developed or developing markets, we're seeing this to be a continued area of growth.
So given all of that, can you just comment on some remuneration trends that you're seeing in the Australian market and what candidates should be expecting?
Look, the only thing I'd say is that still, if you're a very high-performing individual, firms are willing to make attractive packages to win you over. That's certainly always the case. I just feel like through COVID, there was almost this expectation that if you're going to move, it had to be for a significant pay increase. Otherwise, why would you do that? Versus I think the attitude really that one should be thinking about is this role right for my career? Does this position me nicely for the next phase of my career? If you're good at what you do, the money comes. So I think the money is still there. I feel like it's more of a question around doing a great role, doing a good job in your role, being a great corporate citizen, showing humility and, patience and empathy and being highly professional. And I think if you do all of those, the money will come.
Maybe to pivot a bit, Lindsay, when we were planning this episode with you, you brought up this interesting concept of hard to want and something I'd never heard before. Could you please talk us through what you mean by this?
Sure. Look, this is a term that I guess comes from earlier years in the dating scene, but the old comment of when you're playing hard to get, playing hard to get versus hard to want. I think now that I've moved over to executive search, I do use this term a lot. There is a very fine line between the two. And what I'm talking about there is sometimes we meet with candidates and they're great candidates, but they will go in, to potential employers and instead of being forthright and confident, it can almost come across as a ransom list of demands. They almost forget what they can bring to the organisation. I want flexibility. I want this. Me. Well, what about, and that's what I say hard to want. What about what you can bring to the organisation? And it's a fine balance sometimes. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. I think particularly where we've come from a market where candidates have been offered everything on a platter and, now we're back to more normal conditions, there's probably an adjustment in attitude and expectations that probably needs to happen.
Yes, yeah, and you've nailed it, Em.
It's funny though too, right? I mean, we're a very small market here. We've gone through so much growth in so many industries. Employers do want to hold on to great staff. They do want to give these great, extra incentives to their staff members. It's just the way you ask and the way you present yourself. And I think, again, I don't want to harp on about this, but it's something that I do really believe in. It is just how you, really hold yourself in the interviews and, I guess, empathy and warmth and having conviction in your ability. I think, all of those things together are a wonderful, recipe for success when you're trying to obviously put your best foot forward.
I think that's good advice for all of us to keep in mind that, it's a two-way contract. You're looking for the best opportunity for you, but they're also looking for the best hire. Trickling on from that and trying to be the best candidate for the role, I think a lot of us go through a period of, should I be doing more study? I know that I must just love pain and stress because I'm continuously doing more study. But I guess ultimately, is this going to benefit our career, right? Like, are we going to get an ROI on the time and the expense to do additional work, whether that be CFA or whether that be MBA? Do you think that that's a valuable thing to have as a candidate, or is it more about on-the-job experience? And we can talk about it potentially, obviously, at the junior level, but even at the more senior level as well.
I mean, look, I'll quickly jump in there. I actually think it depends on the industry, and I think it depends on the hiring manager. I've got some really awesome clients who truly believe that an MBA from the States is the most valuable, component you can bring to a resume. They will fall over hands and fists for people who have done that and come back with these insights. I've got some here that really just feel that, it's the on-the-job experience and the on-the-job, professionalism and what this person brings to the role is really important for them. So there's no right or wrong. And I think when you're exploring these components, it's all about doing your due diligence and planning your career. There's no point doing an MBA or the CFA or a master's if you don't feel it's going to take you to where you want to be. So sure, if you're an analyst, of course the CFA is extremely well regarded. And yes, it might end up meaning that you might get paid a bit more because you've done it. Or you may get the job and you pip someone to the post because you've done it, and therefore other successful candidate. 100%, that is certainly something that we definitely see. We'll have clients say that they want a CFA. Some will say they don't. They just want money-making ideas, Meredith. That's all I want, someone who just picks stocks every day to make me money. Meredith, money, It just depends. So it's all about planning. It's all about thinking where you'd like to go and finding other profiles that have done this before you that you can look to and say, is this the right pathway? How did they get there? Talking to individuals like us to understand if that would make sense or not for whatever, pathway the individual's looking to take.
Yeah, and I totally agree with Meredith. But one thing I would say is I don't think you'll ever be excluded from a role for over education. And so whereas the opposite is true. And so I don't think there's ever such a thing as, I wasted my time doing a CFA or an MBA or going and getting the ESG certificate from the CFA course or doing the Cambridge ESG. You will not be excluded for a role by having those qualifications. So that's my simple view on that.
Thanks, guys. They're really helpful insights, and very interesting to hear that really depends on the hiring manager and just remembering what's going to be the best thing for your path. You've got great oversight across both the buy side and sell side. I think for a lot of potential listeners who might be on the sell side, they might be thinking about shifting to the buy side, grass is always greener, etc. It'd be great to hear your perspectives on the differences between both, maybe in terms of obviously role and lifestyle and remuneration.
Sure. So look, you have hit the nail on the head there, Maddie. I think there is a misnomer that going from sell side to buy side is greener pastures. What I often say to candidates looking to make the switch is that is a complete misnomer. I think moving to the buy side, the money is typically invested all the time. And to quote a really old school movie that's probably older than both of you, money never sleeps. So when you're fully invested at 90 to 100% and suddenly, it's after market and your company's had a massive downgrade and, it's a substantial holding and you've just lost 30% and, it's absolutely a very stressful and responsible position because ultimately you're in charge of and the custodian of people's retirement funds. So it is absolutely not a work-life balance play. It is a very stressful role. You are having to report to consultants. You are having to come up with monthly performance figures. And so, in the context of planning a career, I think, both roles have huge level of intensity to them. They're also highly enjoyable. And if you love markets, you love markets. I think remuneration, again, it depends on where you are, what you do. And, if the only reason you are there is for money, you're there for the wrong reason in the first instance.
I totally agree with that. I also just think that, money isn't free. If you're going to make good money, you have to work hard. And you're going to take on pressure. And if you're going from the sell side to the buy side, guess what? All of a sudden you're taking on the burden of investing all of our parents' money out of super. That's what you're doing. You're looking at us all down the street and wearing that burden. Oh, I'm responsible for your retirement. It's a big deal. And if you're not taking that seriously, I think, you're in the wrong role. But look, the sell side's awesome. It's fast moving. It's front of the market. There's a lot of, cachet in being, a really knowledgeable analyst about a certain part of the market. You get access to awesome corporates, the CEOs within Australia, as you do on the buy side. But you become more of a specialist in the field and you can own that. And that kind of becomes your core selling point. Whereas on the buy side, if you're really good at picking stocks and making money, that's your core selling point. So they are different. They're a similar skill set, but again, it depends on how ultimately you're wired and what you're interested in, but you will work hard in both roles.
Yeah. And one thing I would just jump in and say, I mean, one thing on my side, I was brought into Platinum Pacific Partners to work on as the sell side specialist, given that's my background. I also work on buy side, but, also to build out the listed company investor relations side of our business. So that's another element where, you may go from sell side to buy side or in the reverse. And then at some point, if it comes that you want to stay in the markets but you want to try something else, a lot of candidates will move into listed company investor relations, which, again, you're in the markets, you're a trusted advisor responsible for messaging to the capital markets community. The message from the CEO and CFO, hugely interesting role also.
Yeah, really good points. I have said a few times that, on the sell side, you're paid for your ideas and your thoughts, right? So preferably you're right, but it's not the essential thing that you're right. Whereas on the buy side, it's be right, whether it's for the wrong or right reasons, right? Because you are taking that responsibility of managing people's money. So definitely different pressures. Okay, this is a selfish question. So an important topic that I think has been really, really present particularly since COVID, and it feels like maybe the last 12 to 18 months in particular, but there's a desire for people to move outside of Australia and to move to an overseas market. I guess it would be really interesting to understand what you've seen in terms of the transition to moving overseas and then subsequently moving back again. So how easy is it to get a job or a role overseas? Are Australian candidates desirable in an offshore market? And then does having that international experience make it easy to come back to a role in Australia? Or are the experiences actually not very useful to each other and it's actually not going to be a career move?
It's a really, really relevant question because we talk about it every day with again, I'm going to keep going back to this planning piece and again, planning your interviews, planning your life, planning your career, failing to plan is preparing to fail. Look, what makes you valuable? It's either knowledge of a certain area if you're an analyst, whether that be European equities, a certain sector. If you're in sales or relationships, it's a client base. The more you develop experience in a certain part of the market, that is where your value is effectively comes from. So if you are wanting to work overseas, you have to think about where your value is. If you have only been looking at Australian equities for 5 or 6 years and you go to London, guess what? No one's looking at Australian equities in London. They are looking, though, at maybe a subsector of what you looked at, small caps. Yeah, that's transferable. Sure, small cap analysis is the same everywhere. I mean, loosely speaking. And that is a transferable skill set. If you are a high-performing research salesperson and your relationships are here, guess what? You're not going to have any relationships in London or New York. You could plan with your employer to go and work in London and New York and come home and do a rotation that way. Absolutely, that works. It's awesome. People have great careers with institutions doing that. But broadly speaking, it isn't transferable. So where we see, I guess, the most success for individuals is either if they've moved within a company and they've developed experience here and they've moved with the company and they've developed experience over there and they've got some sort of, leverage, on both regions that they can play to. If they've gone overseas a bit earlier, so say 25 to 30, that's a great time to go to London or America, really cut your teeth, understand the industry, learn, what's happening in the world, come back not so experienced that a business can still invest in you, but you've got some core skills. Let's say you were an analyst in New York, a long short hedge fund. Guess what? That analysis, that stock picking is still relevant for our majority long only market here. You're not so old that you're going to be really expensive in terms of price and expect a certain premium for your experience. This sort of thing works well. Otherwise, it is a little bit difficult to come back. We meet many people who have great careers, want to come home between 35 and 45 for family and high school and things, and they just can't find the role that they want to do at the salary that they're happy to accept. So there's a few components that you need to take into account. Either go early and develop some really great experience, when you're young. Like I actually went to London when I was 21. I came home at 26, which is kind of perfect because then I could develop my whole career here. He went overseas a bit later. Where did you go, 25, 26?
No, I was 27 actually.
27, and then she was back by 30, and then invested again in her career in Australia. So it's just a choice, and it's just knowing that the world is massive out there and there are so many more people. The population, obviously globally compared to Australia, is vast and it's massively competitive. So you've got to think what your value is in order to work overseas and come home with that skill set.
Yes. And further to that point, we often deal with candidates who have been living offshore for 15 and 20 years. And it is incredibly hard to reintegrate when your relationships and your whole world essentially is then in a foreign market. And so we often counsel those candidates, explaining that they do have to be patient. And it can take quite a long time to transition back.
We've had people come back, like I've headhunted someone out of a hedge fund and pulled him out, really, he wasn't even thinking about coming back, came back to Australia and hated it. Wasn't ready to come back. It was opportunity legs. He thought, wow, I never see those opportunities. And yeah, they're looking for my unique skill set. And he lasted 9 months and then they went back to London.
The other element to that is that New York and London, or Hong Kong even, they're markets that are so much bigger than Australia. And sometimes you do find that the move back to, Sydney or Melbourne, it's, a lot smaller. It's not as exciting. There's not as much going on. So we definitely hear a little bit about that as well.
It might be a good time to discuss what you guys see as the key differences between covering domestic equities versus global equities, like domestic being based in Australia. And if you think there are any particular skill sets that make one analyst better suited to either?
The way I think about this, if you're covering domestic equities, you're typically based in Australia, covering companies, okay? We do see a lot of those analysts come directly from sell side. Emily, like yourself, you once came from Morgan Stanley. Am I not correct there from memory? That's a very typical transition. And that can be small caps, that can be large caps. Then we also have funds that focus on micro cap end of the ASX. Okay, so that's that side. Then we have global equities analysts. Now, interestingly, they can be based in Australia covering global equities. That can be Asia ex Japan. It can be the full Asia suite. It can be developed markets or developing markets. It just depends on the fund's mandate. What I would say is covering global equities from Australia, it can be particularly developed markets, i.e. European names or US names, means that you are keeping some pretty crazy hours. And that's why you see a lot of those funds decide to relocate those PMs or senior analysts offshore so they're not awake at 2 o'clock in the morning. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm lived experience, so I can tell you that the time zones are not fun. And you're right. There's, you think about being on the buy side and there's things going on all the time as it is, yet alone our market is on our time zone. And then you're going to have to think about, okay, what's happening overseas while I'm asleep. So I can imagine that would be challenging.
Mm-hmm. The basic skill set, however, remains. You are somebody that we identify as, I am passionate about stocks and I'm a small cap animal. I'm a tech animal. I love developed markets. I've got NVIDIA. I've got Apple. I know XYZ. I know about consumer in Europe. I own LVMH and L'Oreal. The skill set is still a very hungry market animal at the core. It's just dependent on what subsectors and what market and what mandate you are covering.
Great. Now, we've touched a little bit on, hard to want and certain aspects of the market which are, desirable at the present. But you obviously see candidates day in, day out. I'm sure both good candidates and maybe not so good. But it would be interesting to get your opinion on what you think makes a great candidate. Is it purely the skill set, or are there other areas of personality traits that may make a good employee that people want to hire?
For me, it's attitude, and that won't surprise anyone. Responsiveness, transparency. So if I'm dealing with a candidate who is in a process, they just have the basics that you would expect in anything you do in life, actually. They respond to your messages, phone calls, texts, emails. They're transparent. Are you in any other processes that I should know about? There's no point in lying. It's a very small industry. It's just a very basic style of communication, transparency, responsiveness, and just being well-mannered and attitude. And for me, that's the perfect candidate. And it means that we will have a long, long relationship through the cycle, through your career. I think that's everything from my side. Meredith?
Yeah, I love all of that. What I would also say is a perfect candidate for me is someone who makes my life super easy. So that means really clear CV with all the relevant information in a nice order with no typos. I love someone who's done their due diligence and knows what they want to do in some sense. It's okay if I've got other ideas for them. That's okay. One thing actually Lindsay and I were talking about is we're on the phone all the time. We are in meetings all the time. We are chatting to people all the time. So it's really hard for us to do callbacks and things. It's really good. Like emails are great. Someone who's willing to work with us on our platforms, I think that's awesome. Ultimately I love people who apply themselves. I love people who've shown continued success in their career, whether that be sport, music, art, really challenge themselves. I love this sort of type person because I feel like those attributes, again, show someone who's ambitious and driven and is continually evolving, and that's certainly what the financial markets are. So attitude is a huge one for me. I've mentioned it before, but Lindsay, really nailed that. But again, just thinking about your whole profile and how we're looking at it, both from a written perspective, CV, your LinkedIn, if you've got any, private social accounts, make sure they're private. If we're going to Google you, we don't want to see you, skiing somewhere and, in a bar, whatever else, because that means all of our employers can see you as well, be thinking really about your career as a whole and, managing that package.
Awesome. And I think you've both mentioned the idea of good corporate citizen before, which is, another good point to remember. Knowing when to look at opportunities or take a leap can be quite difficult. And I'm sure you're guiding so many candidates through, the decision-making process of shifting their careers or maybe shifting firms within the same type of career path. When do you think it is the right time for a candidate to leave their current role and start looking at other opportunities?
Sure. So Meredith and I were speaking about this earlier, and I'm condensing this down. The short response to this is it's when you're feeling stale. What does that mean? When you're not learning, you're not growing, you're not challenging yourself. And I think as soon as that realization happens, that's when you've got to start being open to new conversations.
I said too, not everybody jumps out of bed in the morning to go to work, but you've got to have a certain kind of desire to want to be at work, and create a great day for yourself and do some really interesting things. And so I think if you're not doing that, then I think you're feeling a bit stale.
One thing I also say is sometimes, and this is important in the context of a market where, it's probably not paying at the same levels historically because it's just a tougher market. And I think what's important is the premium you put on your happiness and who you work with. So just because you didn't get an extra $10,000 or $5,000 or whatever the percentage is you think you are worth for the work that you put in that year, is that enough to justify potentially leaving an organisation to go and work with people where culturally, I love going to work every day. I vibe off the people I work with. I enjoy that. It would take a lot for me to have to move. And I've thought about this over the trajectory of my career, and I counsel executives on this all the time. I think you do need to put a premium on the culture that you work within.
Everyone loves an interview tip from, first job through to senior director. So let's take the negative, and what should we be avoiding doing in an interview?
So again, trying to wing it. It's never going to work. Never wing interviews. You've got to go in with something that you're going to say. So let's talk about that. I always tell my candidates, why don't we pretend that you're the interviewer and you're going to interview yourself for the role? What questions, if you were the client, would you ask yourself? Like, ooh, good question, Meredith. Oh, yeah. And usually it's always, okay, so tell us about yourself. That'll be number one question. Number two, why is the role of interest? Number three, what do you know about us? Number four, okay, cool, what can I tell you? This is how it starts. So you could literally write down verbatim what you want to say and memorize it and have the first 20 minutes of the interview done, going perfectly. By that point, you're totally relaxed in the groove, and the next part of the interview is going to be fine. So absolutely don't wing interviews ever.
Which goes back to the very first point when you asked us about embarrassing moments of your career. It's when you're not prepared.
Oh, yeah, I know. Or you're half asleep and you haven't had a cup of coffee or a tea and you're tackling something really challenging. But yeah, no, don't wing it.
The other one, if I may jump in, Meredith, is I think not listening.
Talking over people in the interview as well. Don't do that. Usually we meet people who are all great. If anything, they're just a bit shy because they're a bit nervous. That's why I say don't be. All the questions are the same.
Just an aside, do you attend the interviews with your candidate, or do you just get the feedback following the interview?
I mean, I do lots of role play. I do. And I do it on the spot as well. They don't even know it's coming. I'm like, right, okay, so what are you going to say in the interview? Okay, let's do it now. Right, bang.
The reality is a lot of candidates, myself, Meredith, all of us here included, when we're in an interview situation, we do sometimes get nervous. And, I hate a pregnant pause, but I hate silence. And so it's one of the key interviewing techniques out there where they will deliberately use silence. And then what happens is the candidates talk and talk and talk and talk and talk. So you've just got to be comfortable, slow things down, listen to the question, concisely answer it, and end.
You've shared some fantastic advice to our listeners today, Meredith and Lindsay. Thank you so much. And I'm sure there are plenty of listeners now perhaps contemplating if they should be looking for a new challenge. So how should a candidate get in touch with you if they are looking to take a new step in their career, or equally, given your wonderful reputation in the market, I'm sure companies would be interested in getting in touch with you?
Yeah, I mean, we love talking to anybody and everybody, so always delighted to connect. Like I say, email is awesome because effectively it's our to-do list. We always just work through that every day. LinkedIn's also good too. Message is hard because our inboxes are crazy busy, so I would probably prefer email. Otherwise, if we're available to have a call, great, but email would be awesome. That's probably the most efficient way.
Fantastic. And now we'd like to finish every episode in the same way, and that is, all you've been doing is sharing career tips, to be honest, but let's round it out. It doesn't have to be related to recruiting or new roles. It could be your personal lived experience. What would you say is your top career tip for listeners?
You know what I think it is? I think it's just being open to opportunities. I think it's just, obviously doing your best every day that you can. But if someone says to you, hey, do you want to come and do a secondment over here for 3 months? Go grab it. If someone says, hey, we're doing this networking afternoon, we'd love you to go and talk to some people about what you do, go do that. I think it's just making sure that you're not closing any doors. And if you're offered opportunities just because you're being valued internally or you're doing a great job or people love having you around because you've got a wonderful personality, run with them. Run as fast as you can and go as far as you can. That's probably the key one, I would say.
I think added to that, I totally agree, but I think added to that is remembering the market is small. And so always treat people with respect, always be well-mannered. Being a good corporate citizen is so important, and relationships are key.
Yep, amazing advice to round out the episode. As I said, this is one that we've been wanting to do for so long, and I think it definitely lived up to the expectations. So I appreciate both you, Meredith and Lindsay, jumping on and chatting with us, and hopefully our listeners are going to take a lot away from this. So if anyone wants to get in touch, please do reach out to Platinum Pacific Partners. You can reach Meredith or Lindsay on LinkedIn, or I'm sure their emails are readily available everywhere. So please do reach out if you just want to have a chat, and thanks for listening. Thank you for listening to the Alpha Females Invest podcast. If you like this episode, we would love your support on Instagram. You can find us at Alpha Females Invest. You could also leave a podcast review, but most importantly, please keep listening. See you next time.